And it goes from there. It is really fast. It's a good omens. Good omens, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's so easy to discount because it's, you know, but then you get into it. And you can't read it in spite of our writing. Oh, my God. So,
Okay, Matthew, I don't need you.
can you guys hear me okay?
No picture.
Oh.
No
We can,
picture.
Roy, can we hear you? You're gonna do the uncomfortable.
There's no picture.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yep.
I
That's what
mean,
it
I
said.
have a voice that tends to hear. Not that any of you notice that. There was one time down in the sanctuary, they forgot to give me a microphone. And the little old ladies in the back came up and said, this was 30, 50, whatever years ago, when there were little old ladies, you know. One of them came up to me and said, I always like it when you talk, because I can hear you. I had no idea. Anyway, welcome to our discussion.
I'm gonna let Bruce introduce you.
Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah, here's Ted Rautman. You're very good at introducing yourself. I'm good at talking about stuff. He's a good explainer of things. So. And most of you in this room are quite familiar with it already. So I'll leave it to her.
Thank you.
Well, Bruce and his lovely sister are especially important to this meeting, to this discussion, because it was their mother who brought me to NAMI. She went to me one day and said, I am teaching a class starting on Thursday, and you are coming to it. Like that, you know. She's awesome. And that's how I know.
You don't need me anymore.
Only when it's complicated, when we need an expert.
Actually, because this is how this works, I actually have to go get ready for next Sunday and put together the worship service during this time for next Sunday, so I can get it out to everybody, so they have the whole week. But I'm grateful for this, grateful for this whole series that you all have done this month. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it just turns out that if I click on, it's like, it remembers you. It remembers your password. And we're all connected too.
Have a good one. Thank you.
And we only got one guy up.
There's nobody else but Lloyd.
That's it. Little guy floats
Well,
up
the
here.
audio on Zoom is really bad
Is it?
for anybody who's speaking on the side.
I gave up trying to watch classes online because it's just, the quality is just so, we miss so much, it's not even. But having said that, I haven't tried for some time because we gave up during COVID when it was more actively.
I mean, I guess this isn't
Yeah.
Well, the microphone is turned a different way, right? So I'm wondering,
Oh, yeah.
who's watching at home, Roy?
Right. Roy said,
But don't ever think nobody's watching,
Okay.
because, you know, some of us are watching, but we don't subscribe, so we're not counted.
Okay.
so last week we had a little problem. Everything was disconnected and Matthew connected it, but he did connect one thing, that microphone. And I didn't catch that until the end. And then I said, oh, look at all those green lights came.
Well, and the way my voice goes, they'll hear me at their house anyway.
And so,
People on the side.
Right, but I'm noticing that the microphone is turned a different way today than it normally is. It's normally turned toward the speaker. And now it's turned towards you and
Hey, you're gonna be, you know, brilliant person.
No, they say you don't need it.
Anyway, what we're here to talk about today is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Okay, now you will occasionally, just so you know, hear people pronounce it NAMI. Potato, potato, I am not gonna fight that one. The people here in Albuquerque in the organization tend to pronounce it NAMI. Matthew likes NAMI, whatever. There have been people who thought it was the National Alliance of Mentally Ill. And that is not all wrong, except it's only half of the story. And so if anything today, I hope to focus more on the other half of the story. And I am going to get out my little cheat sheet. Those are my notes for the next hour. NAMI is an organization that includes both people who are ill of a mental illness and people who are the family members of. And these sometimes, but not always, overlap. And family is very different. Family sometimes is neighbors, family sometimes is second cousin 48 times removed, suddenly got stuck with. Family is sometimes, well, I'm here for her and she's here for me. You know, it's whatever works for that group's family. It's not like it has to be a bloodline. And mentally ill are people who have within NAMI's purview, are people who are ill enough that it's really affecting how they are getting along in the world. This does not mean they have to have a clinical diagnosis, thank God, because an awful lot of very ill people refuse to go see a doctor. And if you won't go see a doctor, you can't get a diagnosis. You know, it is very normal for the people with schizophrenia to have voices that tell them that the doctor is trying to poison them. And so, of course, they will not take their medications. Of course, they lie to the doctors because it's the only way to protect yourself. You know, you try to go into UNMH, which has one of the best psych wards here in the city, actually in the state. And there's this very imposing, very impressive, oh my God, they're out to get me. You know, and that can be the end of it if somebody walks on. So there's no way we insist on a diagnosis. But NAMI is strictly peer-led. That means everybody here in NAMI has a lived experience. Now, the word peer is used in two different ways, which drives me nuts. So I'll drop that use. Everybody in NAMI has a lived experience, either as someone with a mental illness or as someone who has a family member who said. We have had people who were, for example, in the UNM social work program, and they're supposed to go sit in on a support group somewhere. And they come in and they say, as part of my social work practicum, can I just come in and watch? The answer is no. We are not here as specimens. We are here as people supporting them. Flip side, nobody's going to stop you at the door and say, prove that you deserve to be here. Yeah.
What about this one? Could someone contact NAMI and say, I don't currently have a family member I'm concerned about. I don't think I'm mentally ill. Some others may wonder about me, but, you know. And, could somebody go in and, like, I'm immediately flashing on an uncle, and of course, since it was an uncle, I didn't know him as a young man, but he had a psychotic break and was diagnosed with schizophrenia in, I call them the bad old days, when they used ECT, electric shock, what do you call it?
Electric,
Yeah. Yeah, it's way back. And you know, I'm very curious about, well, I know what the organization basically does because I used it as a resource heavily when I was working in a mental health related field, prevention of spouse and child abuse in the Army. And when I had to update courses and do similar things, I got a wealth of materials from them and so much information on the phone that I could use in my work as a training course manager for the military. So I have such a positive impression of this organization, more not as a family member or a participant directly, but using it as a resource for a very wide audience. And that I have designated it just recently as one of the contingent beneficiaries in my will.
Thank you.
So when I saw this topic come up, I'm not a regular attendee in the mental health, but I'm very supportive of all you guys do. I thought, boy, I really want to go to this one and bounce up some kudos and support Jenny's presentation.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Yes, you have just brought up a whole bunch of things that I also wanted to make sure I got into. Sorry, drummer taking over. Number one, I have an old uncle who. That is something we hear over and over and over again. I am very active in the family support group. And I also teach the courses for the families. More on that in just a second. But what we hear a lot of, and I've been with NAMI since before 2020, I don't remember exactly when, but I know it was before 2020.
You mean before 2000?
2000.
Oh, it was long before that.
I was gonna say, do you know?
I know that you've been a member since I came to town, which was 2003.
Oh, God. I'm sorry. He came in this morning and said, how are you doing? And I said, well, mildly rattled, but I'm pretending I'm not. Before 2000, yes. It's been a long time. Thanks to her mother. But what we hear is, I have a son who, he was very bright. Of course he was. Now, are there people who have slower processing skills or are otherwise what we used to call mentally deficient, aren't going to do well in school, sometimes aren't going to do well in life, and also have mental illness? Absolutely. But the people that tend to come to NAMI, okay, and this is a self-selected group, tend to have loved ones who are very bright. And then all of a sudden, late teens, early adulthood, my son, whatever he did. And nobody else in my family ever has. And this totally took us by surprise. Did it totally take them by surprise? Absolutely, no argument. 3 weeks later, they say, well, I did have an old uncle who. And you start realizing that it's been in the family. It just wasn't acknowledged. We didn't talk about Uncle whoever. My grandmother had a brother in the late 20-teens, early 1920s, that era, who went out west from Wisconsin. 5 years later, a sheriff called the family and said, he just died in a gunfight in a saloon. What do you want us to do with the body? And they said, why do we want it? But I obviously never knew the dude, and I didn't even hear the story until I was well into adulthood. So there wasn't any acknowledgement that somebody would have been like that. My grandmother was one of the Poppy girls. Last name was Poppy. She and her two sisters were infamous for their acting out behavior in a town the size of Milwaukee. That, yeah, like that. I can trace the bipolar in my family back to my great grandfather. And, this is just something I grew up with. I married a man who was bipolar because I thought that was. And interestingly, my adopted brother is bipolar because when my parents went to the adoption agency and said, this is sort of the kind of kid that we want, that we think would fit in, they were describing somebody who was bipolar. Yeah. So families have these stories, have these relationships. Now, does mental illness of any kind ever just suddenly occur? Absolutely. Yes, it does. And that can be horrific for a family that truly has never had Uncle Susan. Anyway, Uncle Fred, who did whatever. These people, the mentally ill people who happen spontaneously, absolutely. But it's not as common as people think. And that is where I'm trying to go with. If you ever suspect, if you ever wonder, talk to a professional. Can your neighbors help? Yes. Can they be a support group? Wonderful. But if the family members themselves go and talk to a therapist, it doesn't have to be, I think I'm crazy, I want to talk to a therapist. It can be, I have a family member who. I was in therapy for years trying to figure out how to live with Chris. For years.
Does everybody know your husband was Chris?
Oh, Chris was my husband, Chris Rautman. Sorry, yeah, very, very active member of this congregation, very ill. And it was NAMI that finally, after all those years, helped me realize I could not make him well. And that was hard. It was really, really hard. I loved the man very dearly. I wanted to help and I couldn't do it. I'll do a brief pause here. I have over there a whole lot of brochures. Some of them are on different types of mental illness and some of them are on the programs that we offer here. We are part of NAMI New Mexico. And then within that, we are part of the affiliate NAMI Albuquerque. Now, I'm going to be really picky and ask if any of you want to donate money, if you could please give it to the NAMI Albuquerque branch, specify that affiliate, just because NAMI New Mexico has a whole potload of money, and we're the ones that do all the work. And people tend to say NAMI New Mexico just because, you go to the national link and where are you? You're in New Mexico. You click on that, you say, yes, it makes sense. Well, we're the ones that do the work. We don't have anywhere near as much money. Now, all the programs are totally free to the participants. All of us who are doing the teaching, the facilitating, etc., are volunteers. Where does the money go? And this is my teacher's name. And the rent, we currently are in the Gibson Gateway Center down on Gibson, San Pedro, San Mateo, and Gibson. It's wonderful. Up on the third floor. You're welcome to come. I recommend calling first because unfortunately, we do not right now have enough volunteers to manage, every day of the week. On the other hand, if anybody would like to volunteer, boy, would we love to have you. We do offer for main programs. There is this one, the family to family course is, like I said, done by family, people who have someone in their family with a mental illness. Our students are someone who, etc. It is an 8-week course, 2.5 hours once a week. It is a course. And during that time, we cover the basic introduction, not only to what NAMI is, but why, what it's here for, what we can do, what we can't do. We are not an emergency. Somebody is flipping out right now. He's going to stab me. He's, the voices are telling, what do I know? We can't do that. Call 311, actually better would be to call 911, and they will get you in touch with somebody who can. And Albuquerque now leads the country in having the ACS group, which will come out and do its best to de-escalate the situation. People from all over the country come to see our system. Understanding mental health conditions. What are these things? And preparing for crisis. How do you get ready for the fact that this, if it has happened once, whatever it is, a manic episode, a serious depressive episode, a schizophrenic episode, whatever, violence, whatever it is, great chance it's going to happen again. And the more it has happened again, not only is it even more likely to happen, but it's more likely to happen. So you've got to be ready. One of the things that breaks our hearts is when we hear, well, he did that, and he did that, and he did that, and he did that. But in the last 2 weeks, he's been good, so everything's cured. No. In a word, no. Getting a mental health diagnosis, that can be really hard because so many of these things overlap. It would be so phenomenally wonderful if somebody would have one thing, you have a broken leg, there it is. You don't have to check out the dude's spleen unless they fell off in a mountain. So I brought in 1 day's worth of summaries from the support group, the family support group. All the names have been redacted, etc. But this person has a daughter who's 29 with diagnoses of PTSD, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, alcoholism, autism, and borderline personality disorder. Another one has a 67-year-old wife who is major depressive disorder, also becomes very violent, alcoholic, and has fears of childhood abuse. So that, sort of it's hard to figure out quite what that means. Another one, 32-year-old son, ADHD, psychosis, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, autism, paranoia, and major disorganized thinking. Also had a traumatic brain injury as a teen and has violent anger outbursts and has been imprisoned several times. Another one, a daughter who's 26, bipolar 2, that's the one that's not quite as bad, PTSD, borderline personality disorder, alcoholism. You hear a lot of alcoholism. That's called dual diagnosis. It's called somebody who is desperately trying to figure out how to make it not hurt. Can alcoholism cause schizophrenia? Probably not. Can it cause psychotic episodes? Yes. You know, the research on that lane is much better to tell you about than I am. But we hear a lot of that sort of thing. And as I mentioned last week, that's hard. Because the programs that deal with alcoholics usually will not take someone who is also mentally ill. You have to get your mental illness under control before we'll talk to you. And the programs that are set up to help the people who are mentally ill say, well, we can't possibly talk to you until you get your alcoholism under control. The tiny houses that were built with the idea of helping people on the street were an absolutely glorious idea, totally wonderful. You had to be completely dry, completely clean, completely non-psychotic, you know, et cetera, and then they would let you in.
Follow the rather stringent rules. That's why.
Exactly.
So you end up with 0 people. Yeah.
Well, you know, since then they've figured that out and they're trying to figure out how to lighten the rules without setting up a situation where people will either hurt themselves or others. And that is very real, and I understand. But, and that's just half of the people that showed up that particular day. We do share our stories even in class, but obviously in the support groups, that's a whole lot more. The next one for the class are treatment options. We do go over medically, what are the treatments? This is a brain disease. It would be so nice if the brain, once upon a time, they thought that there was this little thing called a homunculus, i.e. a tiny, 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 itty bitty person who sort of lived in the brain and did all the deciding. And all you had to do was get the homunculus to agree to be a good person, usually a good Christian, and everything would be fine. And the person was an alcoholic because the homunculus was weak and you had to get him to agree, you know, to be good. It doesn't work like that. The brain is composed of cells which have connections, which work electrically depending on the chemicals, which, etc. There are more connections in the brain than there are stars in the universe. This is a very complicated system. And trying to get all that stable is very hard. Medication's wonderful. It doesn't solve everything. Therapy is glorious. It doesn't solve everything. The two together, better chance, lifestyle changes, all of that. But there are so many treatment options. Then there are things like communication skills and problem solving. All right, so you've got this person who cannot talk to you, who cannot come out of their room, who just spent 3 months on the couch under a blanket. How do you talk to this person? Collaboration, empathy, and recovery. How do you work with this person to help them to recover as much as they can, as much as they want to? Rick Well just looked in the window and waved on his way to the organ yesterday. And then our last one is self-care and moving forward. One of the things we say every single week is you have got to take care of yourself. Living with someone who is mentally ill is one of the hardest things there is. A therapist, my daughter had a therapist one time who said, you know, when you go home at the end of today, you have to go home and live with you. When I go home, I get to have a beer and turn on TV. The family doesn't get to just go home and have a beer and turn on TV. And then we also have someone with diagnosed mental illness who has been sort of vetted to make sure they're stable enough to talk to the class, come in and talk about what it's like from their side. What it's like from their side to be part of a family. Now, that's the family to family course. I also mentioned a lot of our therapy group, the support group, not a therapy group, it's a support group. That means once a week on Zoom. Yeah. Once upon a time, it was all in person, of course, COVID, shocking you. The nice thing about Zoom for us is that we have folks from the Navajo Nation. We have a guy who shows up every week from Ruidoso. We have people from Silver City, Santa Fe, honest. Real life people who come every week because they can. And they for sure aren't gonna drive them out to Albuquerque for that. We also, however, do once a week, once a month on Tuesdays, every other Wednesday morning, Tuesdays are in the evening, have support groups in person. Because there are people who hate Zoom. One of our facilitators, actually two of our facilitators, absolutely refuse to do it on Zoom and have to be in person. You know, so we do our best to meet people where we're coming from. The family support groups are an hour and a half. And what do? We get together, there are always two facilitators. So it's never just one of us. And first we go through guidelines, principles of support. This is how we're gonna do this. And then go around the room. Everybody who wants to, totally okay to pass, gets 2 minutes or so, tell us your story. What's happening? Who's your person? What's happening at your house? If it's your very first time, we're gonna need some background. If you've been here every single week for the last 2 years, you know, you can just catch up a little bit more. And then we open the floor. And it's a support group. And people tell each other, you know, have you tried that? What about it? You know this legal. Oh my God, what do I do when? You know, my co-facilitator and I, there are currently 6 of us, I think, who rotate through the Tuesday evenings. We are there as anchors, and occasionally we'll say, yes, that works for some people, but you know, every now and then we'll get some people who say, my medication is, and everybody ought to take it. And
Yeah.
Gretchen took one once. It was very highly recommended. Her neurologist thought this was going to really solve all sorts of things. So, actually, I take it back. It was the psychiatrist who prescribed it. I remember that now. We went to Phoenix the next week. Gretchen started going blind because it turned out that that very highly medicated, highly recommended medication increased the pressure of the liquid around her brain, would then increase the pressure on her optic nerve, which then made her start to go blind. And she looked at me one day at lunch and said, I can't see. This was not good. We got her to the nearest emergency room, et cetera, et cetera. She's now fine. Very highly recommended medication. There ain't no way I'm telling anybody else what to take. Yeah, because at least the brains really are that individualized. But the nice thing about a support group is you can find out what might be out there. There's some people who've never heard of a special needs trust. Trusts you set up specifically designed to help provide money for someone who's mentally ill, who can't take care of their own money after you're dead. You know, things that specific, or it can just be you're not alone. It's hell the first time you have to call the police on your own loved one. It is hell. The second time that someone comes and takes them away in a police car to jail, and you go, oh my God, here we go again. We had somebody last week who said after 5 years, she finally found her daughter again. Daughter was living in a cardboard box down by the bus. But she found her and she was alive. And how huge that was. And to hear those stories week after week and know you're not alone. Other people are doing this too. Now, the other thing we talk about a lot in the family support groups are things like treatments. What works? What's okay to try? And I wanted to mention that, obviously, I just said, you know, we don't prescribe any of that stuff. But somebody just said, back in the bad old days when they used DCT, it is one of the best things out there.
I would like the opportunity to finish that sentence.
Okay.
I worked in inpatient site many years after my uncle's experience without, now I'm forgetting the category of drugs, like that counter, the impact. And I worked on a psych unit for 5 years. I witnessed ECT being performed because the psychiatrists on our ward were concerned that we still had some biased thinking against that form of treatment. But I saw it work in geriatric depression. And that's supposed to be one, or was years ago. All of my data is quite a few years back. But it really was literally an eye opener for us to not just nod and, look at the doctors askance, because we don't quite believe them, but to actually witness it being done. Just don't touch the table.
Yeah.
The only caution while watching.
Yeah, no, thank you. One flew over the cuckoo's nest did more damage to the mental health field than I think just about any other individual movie. Because it made ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, look like the worst thing out there. Do they still use it today? Yes, very effectively. They have also changed how they did it. You know, during the Civil War, more people died of having their limbs amputated than died from gunshot. Nowadays, our troops go into battle, and yes, they have leg wounds. We don't just chop off the legs and kill them. You know, things do improve.
So I have a question about this.
Yeah.
Often in movies, it's depicted that someone has been given an electric shock without their agreeing to it. And
Well, yes and no, but go on.
I had a grandmother-in-law who had been admitted and was getting insulin shot against her will. And this is like 30 now or so, but it was, it's one of these things that it's very effective, but a lot of people are afraid of it. So, it does require consent now in all cases.
There is a problem with patient consent. Someone who is very ill may not be stable enough to be able to give informed consent. And it is very possible that a treatment will finally get them to the point that they can say, yes, that helped. But at first, no, they can't. When my daughter was hospitalized, what she wanted to do was go and hide in the shower, curled up in the fetal position. This doesn't let anybody else take a shower. You know, it also was not as good for her as even just being in the hallway or any other place where there was something that grounded her in the rest of reality. Did she want to go? Oh, no. We heard all about how she didn't want to go here when she was stable. But she agreed that she had to get out of the corner of the shower. Yeah. Do involuntary commitments happen? Yes. They have to, for the safety of the person, for the safety of the family, for the safety of random people walking by on Tuesday. You know? Does it sound nice? Oh, gee, they committed him involuntarily. No, it sounds hideous. The police came, the police handcuffed this person, the police threw him in the back of the car, the police dragged him into a hospital, the police shut the door behind him in the jail. By the way, some of the best mental health care in this state is in the jails. They have to go to therapy. They have to go to the support group. They have to take their medication. Somebody's following up. It's all involuntary and it works. And what a horrific thing to say. It is absolutely horrific. And that's where the support group comes in. Because we say every single week, these family members, you are not alone. We have been there. We know what it's like. And sometimes it's information, but a lot of times it's just, you're not alone. And we have boxes of Kleenex all over the table. And, you know, it gets very, very thick. It really does. How I got into NAMI. As I said, Marita Marshall picked me up and said, you know, you're coming with. She was teaching the family to family course. She said, you're coming. And I said, oh, and then I went and I learned a lot. And then I went home and I looked at Chris. NAMI also offers programs for the people who are mentally ill. We have a similar course called peer-to-peer instead of family-to-family. 8-week course, 2.5 hours, vaguely the same sorts of topics, but by people who identify as primarily as mentally ill rather than primarily as family members. And for people who identify as veterans. We also have a family peer support group called Connections. So it's a little bit harder to figure out just glancing at the folder over there. But we do have a group called Connections, a support group for these people. I looked at Chris. Chris looked at me. That's as far as that conversation got. He never once considered going at all. Not going to happen. Wrong. But those groups are there and they are very very useful. Again, to say, for these people to have a safe place to say, I am mentally ill. You know, one of the best things AA does is give people with alcoholism a chance to say, I am an alcoholic. Narcon, whatever it's called, there is a group for people with narcotic addictions. That one. It's a safe place to go and say, yeah, I am addicted. You know, is this good? No, obviously, but nobody here is going to judge me. Nobody's going to say I'm a bad person. Nobody's going to say my little homunculus needs a spanking. This is who I am, and now what do we do with it? And for that, those are glorious. Now, there's also another group that has just started up, restarted up since COVID. We do not yet have a folder for them, called WRAP, W-R-A-P, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. It's an 8-week program. You'll be glad to know we really like 8 weeks. In which you go through and look at either the family member or the person who is ill, or both, any combination thereof. Go and look at what happens, how do we get ready for it, how do we handle it when it does happen, what do we do afterwards. It's making a plan. Because like I said, if it's happened, it's gonna happen again. And how do you deal with it? If I had ever had a plan in place so that when Chris started I could know that what I should do was, it would have been wonderful. Because I was strictly flying by the seat of my pants. If I had ever had a plan for what to do when my father, oh God, that would have made my childhood. You know, if I had ever had a plan for what to do when my brother, the last time he tried suicide, he was in the ICU for 3 weeks. Fortunately, so far, it hasn't succeeded. But, you know, you're gonna disappear.
But I want to say something before. And it is, this whole book you have here is sort of a new thing. I was born in the 50s, and it seems to me, as you were saying, nobody taught. You know, it wasn't something or that's my impression. I wasn't there in the late 40s, so. But it just wasn't something you would, we're talking about. Even though Freud was 50 years or whatever. But it's gone a long ways, and with other things, alcohol was the same way. You want to call that mental illness? I think you can.
You can.
But
It's a different kind of, but yes.
But it does come a long way, and I would like to say that with my brother who got my mother into this thing, but got you into it. Talking to him was difficult. He could do it. He would do it, but it was a tricky business, you know. And sometimes went very well, and it was fine, and other times it didn't. So there you go. That's about all I can say, except to keep up the good work.
Well, if you would like to take the class.
Keep people talking. So,
I think the book has grown since I took it.
Well, this is the instructor book. This is not.
But I was looking at Mom's instructor book.
Oh, okay, yeah, it has, and when her mother did it, it was a 12-week course. Now it's down to 8 weeks, and some of us are scheduled.
But it was only an hour.
Really? Oh my. I don't know. I took it twice at the beginning, and I've taken it again since, just to refresh, and now I teach it fairly.
But we had an uncle that we taught.
Yeah.
But we didn't say he was mentally ill. He
Oh.
had hardening. you know.
My grandmother killed herself. It was not a suicide because when she stood up from dinner, she thanked the cook for the dinner, which was very nice, and then went into her room and died. So it couldn't have been a suicide because she thanked the cook. She was obviously in a good mood. Now, the fact that she took every single pill in the house was totally beside the point. You know, that was the way the family talked about it. And it wasn't until I was much older that people started admitting to me what had been going on. You know, my grandfather wasn't an alcoholic. He just got absolutely plastered every single night. But he made it to work in the morning. So he wasn't an alcoholic. Yeah, how do family stories get told? And that's one of the wonderful things about both the classes and the support groups, is that it gives you a chance to hear and reframe these stories and figure out what's going on. Now, I asked Gretchen this morning how my being so involved in NAMI has helped our family. Gretchen, those of you who don't know her, 36-year-old, lives with me. All sorts of other all sorts of other physical problems. And because of that, will live with me for the rest of her life, and then she'll go on to her sister. Anna is clerk of session a fair share of the time. Now she's on personnel committee, very involved in this church, PhD, very responsible job, et cetera, et cetera. She grew up with this. And I asked, how has it affected you guys that I'm in NAMI? And Gretchen thought for a minute, and then she said, I think the number one thing, Mom, is that it has made you less reactive. And it has helped us figure out a way as a family to live with this. When Gretchen has a manic episode, one of the things she does is rearrange furniture. As in, my desk will suddenly be in the living room. One day, she went out, we were driving down the street and she saw a yard sale, and you know, we stopped at a yard sale, big whoop, she bought an 8-foot couch. We did not need a couch. We did not have any room in it for a couch. It didn't fit anything. Gretchen bought a couch. And she said, now I have learned that when I want to rearrange the furniture, because for her it becomes physically painful, it hurts. If she cannot let out the energy that says move furniture. If I call you and say, I am going to rearrange, pick a room, I say, fine. Have a good time. Thank you for letting me in. She will move 8-foot bookcases. You know, we're talking major rearranged furniture. I never know what the house bookcases are going to be in. We have a lot of bookcases. But now she tells me. And I get ready. So when I come home and the TV's in a different room, which has happened, I don't freak out. I don't assume it's been stolen. I say, oh, where's the TV now? You know, and we all deal with it. When she goes, because of her medical condition, sometimes she goes, we call it go to couch. She curls up in the fetal position on one cushion of the love seat. Gretchen is 5'7". She weighs more than I do. She fits on one cushion of a love seat. She is so curled up. That could be depression. That could be her physical stuff. Or the physical stuff can lead to depression. Or the depression can trigger the physical stuff. Being with NAMI has helped me realize, okay, first off, you don't freak out. And you make it sure she gets the insure, so she's eating it all. You make sure she gets liquids. You make sure, you know, all those basics. And then how do you deal with this? And being with NAMI has helped me figure out. So it can help in whatever way you need. Now we have over there also the warm line, as well as information on the hotline. The warm line is for people who just want to talk. You don't have to have an issue going on. You can just be looking for general information. It's Tuesday, you feel like chatting with somebody. That's okay. That's what the warm line's for. The NAMI hotline is a national hotline. It's a national suicide line. Yeah, that's big time. I'm furious with my sister-in-law when my brother is trying to kill himself. She never calls the hotline. You idiot. But anyway, it also exists, obviously.
What could the hotline do for the?
What I can do is, Blake probably knows better than I do. What the hotline did for me was to give me some clues about what not to do. Given also that he's in Phoenix and I'm here. But what not to do, and some ways of listening so that the person doesn't feel pushed into it. Now with Gretchen, one of the things they suggested was, and it was one of those, no duh, why didn't I think of that? I got a small safe. Yay big, very unimpressive, really cheap lock. I can get every single sharp thing in the house into that safe and under them. Gretchen does not know the combination by choice. Our code word is, are you safe? This is really a secret. Right? Are you safe? And if she says no, I say, where are you? Kitchen, stay there. Doesn't matter which room she says she's in, stay there. And she has to freeze until I get 1 minute, everything into there. And that was at the suggestion of the hotline. It hadn't occurred to me. You know, she calls and says, I'm gonna, you know, and I just say, are you sick? No. My father's stuff was pills. And like his mother, the hotline said, where are the pills? Well, he has some in his bedroom and some in the bathroom and some right. Duh, you get them all in one place and you lock them up. Again, now sometimes there's something very stupid like that. We should have thought of it. Can they always stop it now? No, my brother did it when nobody else was in the house, took every pill in the house, tried to drown himself. Unfortunately, my sister-in-law came home, got him out, etc. He wasn't going to call a hotline and they couldn't have stopped. When my daughters were growing up, one of the things we said frequently when we were leaving the house is, if daddy kills himself while we're gone, it's not your fault. And one of the things the hotline can do is convince you it's not your fault. You can't always see it. Yes, did I see a hand? Oh, I thought I saw you.
I was just starting to raise it.
Okay.
You got me thinking in the past, and I was really impressed. I remember as a young woman, I just had an undergraduate degree, but I worked 2 years before I went to graduate school. And one of my volunteer jobs was human rescue in Kansas City, Missouri. And this was in the 70s. And one of the things that was most impressive about it was a training manual for those volunteers way back in the dark ages of the 70s, mind you. And I know I felt a bit shy or whatever, reluctant because of being so young to take on the responsibility of answering the phone for something called human rescue. But the training gave me the practical help, and the staffing of the organization was such that you could always get answers to your questions and guidance, and you weren't alone
Right.
doing that particular job.
Yeah.
And it was such a whatever, in hindsight, I guess I look at it as a privilege for all the learning and whatever that I got in return for just being a little tiny piece of offering some help and support.
Yeah, but as a NAMI facilitator for the support groups, I underwent a very rigid national training. As a leader for the classes, I underwent very rigid training. I am now a person who is authorized to train the facilitators. That was more training. Oh yeah. In fact, we were kidding this morning that I've probably done a whole lot of years of, I might almost be able to be an honest to God clinician through all this training. Do I want to be? No way. But yeah, a whole lot of training. Yes,
My
ma'am.
question, what services, if any, does NAMI provide for younger people, like teenagers or?
Unfortunately, NAMI National does have programs in Albuquerque. We don't, because we don't have the volunteers. But if you can find volunteers who are interested in doing the training, absolutely, we would love it. We just don't have the people. We also right now have no programs in Spanish here in Albuquerque, of all places. We had somebody who really tried to get one going. The Hispanic community wouldn't come.
Say that's against the call.
We had somebody who tried very hard to get a group going in the Navajo Nation. She ended up hiding in her car to talk to us. And nobody could come. We're really trying to reach out. If you can figure out a way to do it, oh man, we would love it. But trying to get past some of these cultural barriers.
Do you work with Indian Health, or do you know if there's been some attempt to coordinate with Indian Health Services?
I don't know if state is doing it. We don't have an affiliate. Yeah, they might well, yeah, they might well. Anyway, I have to go away because I have to, I'm the person reading the call to worship today. I don't have to do the first reading because Matthew wasn't doing first readings this month. But if you want any of those, for heaven's sakes, take them. If you don't want them, move on. But if you need us, we're here. Please call. There is a website, of course. We love to help in any way we can.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Now you know.
And that's imperfect, right?
Now you know.